Hello, welcome back to another Mindful Mutt moment. I'm Corey from Path of Friendship, and this here, as I think you've been getting to know, is Bodhi. We've done a few of these. And in Mindful Mutt moments, we just take a moment, or a few moments, to really connect and enjoy our friendship with our dogs without any training, without any agenda. It's just a matter of being focused, being in the present, kind of sharing their perspective on the way things are. And to them, the way things are right now. Not the way things were, nor the way things may be. It's always the way things are to a dog. Because their brains are designed and set up to really be immersed in all the things in the present that's happening right now. And so it's nice to join them and to practice mindfulness, which is really what that is, with them, so we can connect with them on their level. And the level does not mean it's a higher or lower level. It just means on their existence, on their level. So, as we usually do, we start out, we're just going to take a breath in and let it out. And just feel the breath in our body. Just feel the experience of the breath. We're not going to judge it. We're not going to say, that breath should have been longer or should have been shorter. We're just going to pay attention and focus our spotlight of attention onto the breath itself. So again, in and out. And feel how your dog feels as you pet them. Feel the connection there, their warmth. I often talk about how their fur feels and the different, the way their muscles and their bones and their whole structure feels under your hand, and really connect with that, which is great. You can also kind of feel the different patterns of warmth here. And you don't need any special skills to do this. This is something we all already have. It's not something that we have to learn. And so as you bring your hand across your dog, just notice the different, you want to call it energy levels, you can call it energy levels. You want to call it warmth or heat, you can call it heat or coolness. But the different sensations that you feel, not just the texture, the physical texture of the fur, but the different heat signatures or energy signatures, if you wish to call it, that are coming off of them. And so you're just kind of like floating your hand kind of right above it. It's like brailing. I did many years ago, I worked very briefly with the seeing eye dogs, and with people who were sight impaired and needed some seeing eye dogs. And one of the neat things about Braille, which I actually tried to learn and I just couldn't do it, but you have to have that kind of just really sensitive awareness touch. You can't be doing that and thinking about a million other things. So I like to Braille my dog. In fact, those of you who remember the great educator and speaker Leo Buscaglia, they used to call him Professor of Love, Leo Buscaglia. He used to talk about brailing. And I remember when I heard that, it was after I had done work with some of these dogs and these people. And it was like, yes, that's exactly it. So let's take a moment just to braille our dogs, to just braille them and feel them. It's kind of neat, And our dogs get a lot from this too, because we're really paying attention to them. We're putting our attention on them. And the greatest gift, it's been said by people much, much wiser than me, that the greatest gift you can ever give someone is the totality of your attention. And that's what I'm giving Bodhi. And when we're mindful with him, that's what we're doing for our dogs. We're giving them the gift of our attention, because they're constantly giving us that gift. And it's nice to share that together. So we'll take another moment, take a breath. Let it out, and let's just braille our dogs. And part of mindfulness is not to judge or evaluate anything, not to say something is good or bad. It's just to accept what is. It's kind of putting aside all those concepts of good, bad, right, wrong, just putting those aside and just taking in the present, because the present is constantly coming in and going out of existence every, not even, I can't even say millisecond, because it's even faster than that. So we don't want to judge, we just want to accept. And acceptance is a really important part of being friends with our dogs. It's an important part of mindfulness, which is also an important part of being friends with our dogs. Meaning, we really have to learn to accept and love our dogs without conditions and without contingencies. You know, it's often been said that dogs give us unconditional love. And yes, that is true. But we need to reciprocate that and give them unconditional love and accept them for who they are. That is critical, because so often we engage in training and manipulation and coercion and all kinds of control-oriented things, and the message that that sends to our dogs constantly is, you're not good enough. Now, can you imagine going through life with your friend telling you constantly, nope, you're not good enough, you have to be different, you have to be better. That eats away and erodes the spirit, and it eventually erodes the spirit of our dogs, and they learn to just perform just to get our approval. But that hollows them out. You know, Bodhi has every right to be Bodhi, as much as I have every right to be me. And I'm going to accept him for who he is. Doesn't mean I have to like everything, but I'm going to love him without conditions and accept him without conditions. Now, what does that really mean? It's not just the feeling, it's an action. So when I first got Bodhi, as I've mentioned before, he had a lot of issues. He was not very accepting of, he didn't like being near me. He didn't like being near anybody, really. He had a lot of what would be known as sort of behavioral issues, doing a lot of nipping and just fear-based kind of things. Instead of me trying to say, well, you're not good enough, and I'm not going to love you unless you perform for me, which is, by the way, what we do constantly. When we use praise and our love as a tool of manipulation, and I've heard this said, unfortunately, I've heard this said by many quote-unquote professionals, never praise your dog unless they do what you ask. Well, then you're just dangling your love like a carrot at the end of the stick, and you're saying to your dog, I'll only love you if you please me. And that's really nothing to base a friendship on. I wouldn't be friends with somebody like that, nor would I expect anybody to be friends with me if I did that. So I accepted Bodhi and loved him for who he was. And he began to gradually change. And even if he didn't, that was fine. Because accepting doesn't mean having it as a fixed kind of thing. There is room for change. In fact, one of my favorite Zen sayings is, you are perfect just the way you are, and there's always room for improvement. Which to me is wonderful, because it's really not contradictory. You are perfect in this moment for what you are. Bodhi is perfect in this moment for what he is. And yes, there are other times that there's room for improvement. But every moment he's still perfect, whether he improves or not. And my acceptance of him and my love of him is not going to be based on his progress. It's not going to be based on his obedience to me, for sure. It's not going to be based on anything other than, here is a beautiful, multidimensional creature that I am fortunate enough to share part of my life with. And I'm going to love him and show him I love him, regardless of how he acts or behaves. Because honestly, so many of these quote-unquote problems are really our problems. They're not their problems. You know, if a dog's running and barking out a window, and you say, my dog has a problem, he's barking out the window. Well, who has the problem? The dog doesn't. The dog's having a blast. Loves to bark out the window. So we that have the problem. Doesn't mean we don't have to try to work it out with them and work out the conflicts, which we discussed. But it means that we could learn to accept them and love them the way they are. So how do we show them we have this unconditional love? One way is this. One way is taking moments and just connecting with them. And Bodhi likes what I'm doing now. He didn't always like it. And as we mentioned before, sometimes you can connect without touching. And connection doesn't always have to be touching. Sometimes connection is just being mindful with your dog, whatever they're doing. Barking out the window. Run to the window with them and look. And join them in that. That's accepting them. You know, it's not always me versus him. It's we're doing this together. But unconditional love means we don't wait for our dogs to perform or be obedient before we decide to go over and be affectionate to them, or tell them what a good dog they are, or tell them I love you, or things like that. It's an action. Being a friend is what we do. We may love them as we would love our family members, but we have to treat them as we would treat our friends. And that's very important, and that really is being what mindfulness is about. And that's what acceptance is about. And we have to accept them for who they are. They may grow, they may not grow. They may change, they may not change. And if we're getting a dog just to say, well, I'm going to get this dog because I want to create this thing later on, well, you're not doing your dog any service, and you're definitely not doing yourself any service. We share our lives with a dog because we love who they are. People often say, I love dogs. Do you love dogs, or do you love what you think you can get from them? I don't love Bodhi for who he may be. I love him for who he is. By the way, that brings up a point, and I'm sure you've run into this. Quite often if I'm like hiking on the trail and maybe there's a biker comes by or a runner comes by, and the dogs will sit next to me and wait for them to pass. And people always comment, oh, good dog. And I always laugh because they're not meaning good dog. What they're meaning is obedient dog. To be honest with you, good and obedience does not have to be synonymous. Bodhi's good dog whether he's listening or not listening. I love him whether he's going to listen or not listen. I'll accept who he is. And that's what being mindful and that's what being friends is. And from that, quite often, the roots of that relationship, the connection becomes so strong that the communication becomes really clear to each other. And then you end up growing together. Growing together. We'll talk more about this on another one, but there's a concept in Eastern thought, and it's known as mutual arising, meaning, you know, we're so often thinking about sort of this domino effect, or a bunch of like billiard balls, you know, one hits another, hits another, hits another, sort of this cause and effect thing. But the Eastern thought is more of this sort of mutual arising where it's like watching a flower grow. The stem of the flower is not the cause of the petals, and the petals kind of unfold at once. And it's not always this linear domino effect. Sometimes it all rises together. Kind of like if you're my generation, you remember the old Polaroid camera. You waited for it to develop. You didn't start on one end and move to the other. It kind of all emerged simultaneously. And that's how the friendship really grows, when we accept them and love them without conditions. And as that relationship grows and blossoms and emerges and strengthens, and the communication naturally comes into play with that, you'd be surprised that all of a sudden you realize, hey, you know what? We're in harmony together. We're living together, and those quote-unquote problems, they're not problems anymore. So that's a much better way and a much stronger way to have a friendship with your dog. So let's take another breath in, breathe out. Maybe braille our dogs one more time. And let's think about just loving them and accepting them for who they are. You know, sometimes it's if you take a step back and you sort of look at it objectively, what your dog is doing, sometimes you may find humor in it. Not all, of course. There are some issues that are not funny, but sometimes it's kind of funny. And when you can accept that, sometimes things change even by themselves. So until next time, take a few moments every day. Join me every day here, 4 o'clock. We're going to do one of these, by the way, hopefully throughout this quarantine period. We've started April 1st. We're going to go to April 30th. So you can join me then, and you can always rewatch the videos. Or even if you don't join me, just take a moment with your dog. Just connect. No agenda. Nothing. Just accept it the way it is and enjoy it. All right. We'll see you next time.